Okay, hello everybody. My name is Jen. I'm here to be your presenter today for our webinar on the Browse Donations screen. I have on my clock that it's just a minute past 3, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that we are going to keep all of the mics muted. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them into the questions panel on the webinar toolbar. That should probably be on the right side of your screen. And we have Josh with us today answering questions. So if you have a question about the topic at hand, go ahead and type it into that questions panel. If you have specific questions about your data or other topics, go ahead and save those, and you can send us an email or give us a call at our support line, and we can handle those questions with you as individuals. The questions that we're going to be having you type in are going to be related to the Browse Donation screen only. All right, well, that being said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up our donations module. And then the browse screen can be reached from this button right here. Let me grab my little highlighter. It can be reached right here from this Browse Donations, or right up here in the corner we have another Browse button. Both of those are the same, and both of them are going to take you to our Browse Donations screen. All right, so let's go ahead and open that up and take a look. I'm going to maximize it so that we can get a good clear picture of what we're looking at here. Now you'll notice that in the bottom portion of the screen we're seeing a list of our givers and amounts, and those amounts are going to be totals, and you can see on this top one it's got a minus sign instead of a plus, and that's because it's already expanded so that we're able to see the different donations for this giver here. Now, this Browse Donations screen is really powerful, and the best way to utilize this screen is going to be by filtering the results to find only the specific donations that you are looking for. It looks like we've got a couple of questions that came in already. Pamela, those questions are not related to today's topic, so if you could go ahead and give us a call about those questions or shoot us an email at support@churchwindows.com, we can get those answered for you. Today we're focusing on Browse Donations. So back to here in the Browse screen, we're going to click this button that says Change Dates, Filter, and Sort. That's going to allow us to limit the donations that we're viewing in our Browse screen here. So I'm going to click that button, and that is going to bring up a new window. And this window is our Browse Donations options. And across the top, you'll see we have several different tabs for the different types of options we have available to us. So first and foremost, we have our giver up here. Now, if you're wanting to see just the donations for a specific giver, you can either type that giver's name in this box or click this drop-down arrow and scroll through the list and select only one donor. And if you make a selection and you change your mind, you have an X right here that you can clear it out. And then you have left and right buttons to navigate to the next or the previous donor in the list. So if we were to select just Jeffrey Alexander and we click OK, you can see all of the rest of the donors disappear and we're just left with Jeffrey, and we can press that plus button to expand and see Jeffrey's donations. Now down here at the bottom, I have a clear filter button that I can click to remove that filter of seeing Jeffrey only, and the rest of the list pops back up. Now let's go back into our options screen. Next we have Pledge. Now Pledge only works if we select a giver who has made a pledge. You can see it was grayed out, and now that I've selected a person, it's no longer gray, and I can type to search, or I can click this down arrow where I can see all of the pledges that Jeffrey Alexander has made. So if I wanted to see just the donations that Jeffrey had made toward this specific pledge, I could select that pledge and click OK. And you can see there are no filter results in my specific criteria. So I'm going to click OK, and that will close this screen. But if I bring it back up, you can see I could come in here and modify some of these other settings that we're going to talk about to try and get the pledge information that I'm looking for. And I believe this pledge is in a different date range, so that's why it wasn't showing anything. But that's okay, we'll go ahead and clear that out, and we'll move on to the next field. Next we have account, and this is where we could select to see, maybe I only want to see the donations to our missions account. So if I select missions and click OK, you can see now we have a somewhat limited list of just our donors who have given toward that specific account. And if I expand it, you'll see only those donations are listed. Let's come back in here. And we also have a clear filter button in here that we can use. So I'm going to click that, and that's going to clear out that account. Next we have the check or reference number. Now this would be used if maybe you printed out a report of your batch and realized, oh no, I entered the wrong amount for a specific check. You could type in the check or reference number here, and it would bring up just that one check or reference number transaction. And you could make any changes or just take a look at that transaction. So that's our check or reference number. Next we have user. Now this refers to if you are using usernames to log into Church Windows, you can search for just the donations that were entered by a particular user. Let's say you have some different volunteers at your church who are all entering donations at different, on a different schedule. If you know that you want to look at all of the donations that one of your users has entered, you could type in their full username in the user field and view only the donations made entered into the system by that specific user. Next we have batch code, and that will allow you to filter the donations to only a particular batch code. If you're not using batch codes at all, this field you would obviously not need to worry about. And you also have a checkbox down here to include batches without a batch code, or you could uncheck this box, and then you would only be viewing batches that have a batch code, regardless of which batch code that is. Moving over to the next column, we have a giver number range. And this would allow us to view, let's say for example, we only wanted to view the givers with a number from 50 to 100. If we click that, you can see in our giver number column, we have just a few givers with the numbers in that range, but we've weeded out all of the rest of the givers with other numbers so that we could just look at one selection of numbers. I'm going to clear that out. And now let's talk about the difference between date occurred and date posted. Date occurred is going to be the date that the donations were actually received, and date posted is going to be the date that you or one of your staff or volunteers entered those donations into Church Windows. So date occurred will likely be, a Sunday, and date posted could be any day of the week. But the difference is date occurred is when the donations were actually given to the church, and date posted is the date that they were entered into Church Windows. Transaction numbers can be used in order to find a very specific particular donation, just like with the checker reference number. You can also search for a range of transaction numbers. Let's go back to our results here. If we look at the full list, and if we see right here in the first column, we have our transaction numbers. And the transaction numbers are going to be automatically assigned to donations by the computer when you enter them. And so if you have specific transactions that you are looking for, you can enter either just one transaction number or you can enter a range. So if I just wanted to see that 2005 transaction number, I could type in 2005 in both boxes, clear that out, and click OK. And then now I'm just seeing that transaction with the 2005 transaction number. Let's go back up here, and we have our amount box. And this would allow us to search for only transactions of a certain amount. Like, let's say we only wanted to see donations from $1 to $200. If we click OK, then we're seeing all of the donations that are between $1 and $200. Now you'll notice here there's one that says $350. And you might be thinking, well, that's out of our range. But if we expand that, you can see that each of the donations listed that total up to $350 are within our $1 to $200 range. So we have 3 transactions that are being added up to get that $350 total. Right. If we bring back up our options, we'll move on to some of these checkboxes down at the bottom. Show reversed is going to allow us to view any transactions that have been reversed in the system. Reversing is essentially the same as deleting. The transaction is not counting toward any of your money anymore. But because we have to maintain an audit trail, the donations that we needed to remove can't actually be completely deleted. They must be reversed. So if we want to see the reversed transactions, we can check that box, and then they will show up in red on the screen as opposed to in normal text. You also have back on the browse screen, you can see down here in the bottom left-hand corner, you have an option right there to include reversed as well. Next, we have this box with all of our different payment methods. So if we wanted, we could view, only transactions that came in by check. If we take all the other ones away and click OK, then we're going to be seeing only check transactions. I'm going to clear out those filters and let's look at these bottom ones. Now these first two at the bottom, show subtotals and suppress repeating transaction data. Those settings are for the print donations report that you can get from Browse. Back here in the main Browse screen, you have this print donations button. And if you were to click that button, you can use the show subtotals and the suppress repeating transaction data. Show subtotals is kind of self-explanatory. It's going to give you a subtotal of each giver's donations on that report. Suppress repeating transaction data is going to combine data that is the same for donations. For example, if someone gave donations to 2 different accounts on the same date, it would only print the date once because the date is the same for both of those donations, even though the donations are to different accounts. So that's an example of some of our repeating transaction data that might be suppressed if we have that option selected. These last 2 checkboxes are going to be user-specific settings. So what that means is that if you have separate user logins, these last two settings will be different for each of those user logins. The Save Selections as Default will save any of the changes that you make in this Donations Browser Options screen. And if you check Always Open to this screen, then when you open up Browse Donations, instead of taking you to this screen, it's going to take you to the Options screen first. All right, and let's take a look at the Group and Sort tab. So Group and Sort allows you to sort by up to 3 different sort fields. And the default, as you can see here, is Giver. It's both grouping and sorting by giver. Grouping refers to the plus and minus buttons for each giver that are combining all of that giver's information under one heading. So let's say, for example, I wanted to change this to account. If I switch that to account and click OK, now you can see instead of grouping by names, it's grouping by the different accounts. If I expand it, then within that account, it lists all of the names of the givers. And in this setup, it's listing it in date order. Now, another option that we have for Group and Sort is to simply drag these column headers into this space right here. So if I wanted to sort by first account and then giver, if I click my mouse on the giver column header and drag up to this gray space, you can see there are some arrows that have popped up above and below. And if I drop that right there, then within my account, each giver is grouped as one set of information. So if we go back into this screen for our browser options, you can see that my dragging of the giver up there has made giver sort field 2 instead of donations date. And it's also grouping by field 2. We could also choose to group by field 3 as well. And you have many options in these drop-downs for the different ways you can choose to sort and group the visible transactions in the Donations browser. A few other options we have here are to show separator lines on the report and to show the totals only as opposed to showing all of the individual transactions. We're going to jump over to the Columns tab now. And the Columns tab, which is available in several different places throughout Church Windows, will have the available columns on the left and the visible columns on the right. The visible columns can be moved up and down the list. And if you want to remove any items from the visible area, for example, if I don't use batch codes at all in my record keeping, I could click on that field, batch code, and click the arrow to the left to move it over to the available side and off of the visible side. And this page especially is where this Save Selections as Default might come in very handy for you. You could go through and limit this so that all you're seeing is the date, amount, and transaction number, for example. You could get rid of all of the other fields. You can use either a double click to move items back and forth, or you can use the arrow keys. You can also alter the width of the columns using this width column. These last two tabs real quick, we have fonts, and this is going to be for the report. You can set each of the different areas of font text to whatever you'd like them to be. And you can reset them if you've made changes and you don't like the changes. And on report options, we can choose to include V's and D's, like you see here next to Jack Albin. He's a D for donor. And if we check these boxes, then when we print a report from this screen, it will include V and D indicators. Okay, looks like we're just about at our 20-minute mark. So I'm going to finish up here. It looks like we've gotten through everything. If there are any other questions, let's go ahead and get those typed in. Josh has answered all the questions that have come in so far, so we're doing good there. I hope that this has helped, and I hope that you'll be able to utilize the donations browser more efficiently and thoroughly to find all of the information that you need from your already entered donations. All right, I'm not really seeing any questions coming in. So if you do have a question, you're typing it in, go ahead and hit the enter button or submit so that we can get all your questions answered. Thanks for attending. Thank you, Mildred. I'm glad it was helpful for you. I hope it was helpful for everyone else too. If you don't have any questions, you can go ahead and close out. And thank you again for attending.